The family's starving artist. The Thompson family had perfected the art of creative dismissal, treating my painting career like an extended phase that I'd eventually outgrow once I got serious about practical employment. At 29, I was still the family's cautionary tale about pursuing impractical dreams instead of stable career choices that generated reliable income. "Alex is still playing with paint in that cluttered studio apartment," Dad announced during Sunday brunch at the Metropolitan Club, the upscale establishment my brother Marcus had chosen to celebrate his latest promotion at the investment firm. 6 years out of art school and still no real job, no steady income, just expensive hobby supplies and unrealistic fantasies. I pushed my eggs Benedict around the fine china plate, the familiar weight of family condescension settling on my shoulders like lead paint. My studio work wasn't playing with paint. It was a rigorous artistic practice that had been gaining recognition in galleries and art publications across the country. "Alex needs to face economic reality," Mom added, sipping her mimosa with the authority of someone who'd built a successful interior design business through practical skills and client relationships. "Art is a wonderful hobby, but it's not a sustainable career. No health insurance, no retirement benefits, no professional stability. No professional stability. My representation by 3 major galleries and inclusion in museum collections apparently didn't qualify as legitimate career advancement in their assessment. Marcus just received another bonus for his portfolio management," Dad said proudly, gesturing toward my brother who was glowing with the satisfaction of quantifiable professional achievement. "Real clients, real returns, real recognition. That's what career success looks like." The contrast was never subtle. While Marcus's finance career generated impressive numbers and social recognition, my artistic work was consistently characterized as expensive self-indulgence that would eventually be abandoned for practical employment. "Alex's problem," Uncle Richard said with the wisdom of someone who'd built a successful accounting practice, "is that art school filled their head with unrealistic expectations about creative careers. The starving artist lifestyle isn't sustainable past age 30. Starving artist lifestyle. As if my gallery sales and commission work weren't generating income or providing financial security. The art world is so unpredictable," Aunt Patricia added knowledgeably, despite having no experience with creative industries. "One day you're popular, the next day taste changes and you're irrelevant. No stability, no long-term security. No stability, despite my work being collected by major institutions and featured in permanent museum exhibitions. What exactly does Alex do all day in that studio?" Cousin Jennifer asked with genuine curiosity, as if my work was so foreign it required translation. "Paints pictures and calls it a career," Marcus explained with the patient tone used for discussing children's activities. "Large canvases with abstract designs. Very artistic but not exactly marketable to normal people. Very artistic but not exactly marketable. While galleries competed for my work and collectors maintained waiting lists for my paintings. The problem with modern art," Uncle Richard said with authority, "is that it's all subjective nonsense. Alex spends months on paintings that look like accidents. Real careers produce measurable results. Measurable results. Because apparently artistic achievement couldn't be quantified through exhibition history, critical reception or market value. Alex could make excellent money in graphic design," Mom suggested brightly, as if she'd discovered the perfect solution to my career confusion. "All that artistic training could be applied to advertising and marketing. Real companies would pay well for practical design work. Graphic design. Using my fine art training to create corporate marketing materials rather than developing my artistic vision through gallery representation. Or art therapy," Aunt Patricia added helpfully. "Alex could work in hospitals or schools, helping people express themselves creatively. Apply artistic skills to something that provides steady income and social benefits. Art therapy. Using my painting expertise to facilitate other people's creative expression rather than pursuing my own artistic development. The important thing," Dad said with the finality of someone dispensing life wisdom, "is that Alex eventually transitions into work that provides financial security and professional recognition. This studio hobby can't continue indefinitely." Studio hobby. 7 years of rigorous artistic development and 3 years of professional gallery representation reduced to recreational activity I'd eventually abandon for real employment. What they didn't know was that my hobby had produced work that was revolutionizing contemporary painting and attracting attention from the art world's most prestigious institutions. My paintings explored themes of urban isolation and technological alienation through innovative techniques that combined traditional oil painting with digital manipulation. They also didn't know that the Guggenheim Museum had been courting my work for the past 8 months, planning a solo retrospective that would establish me as one of the most important painters of my generation. But in their narrative, I remained the family member who'd wasted my education on impractical pursuits instead of building a stable career like Marcus's finance success. Alex's art professor keeps encouraging these gallery fantasies, Mom said with concern. These academics don't understand that most people need real jobs with steady paychecks, not artistic careers that might not even exist. Artistic careers that might not even exist, despite working with galleries that had represented successful artists for decades. Creative careers are so unstable, Uncle Richard agreed knowledgeably. One day you're selling paintings, the next day the market crashes and you're unemployed. No security, no benefits, no future. No security, no benefits, no future. Despite my work being insured for hundreds of thousands of dollars and my career trajectory pointing toward museum-level recognition. The artist lifestyle isn't sustainable long-term, Dad concluded with practical authority. Alex needs to start thinking about marriage, homeownership, retirement planning. Real-life responsibilities that require reliable income. Real-life responsibilities that apparently couldn't be supported by artistic careers that contributed to cultural development and institutional collections. The gallery breakthrough. What my family didn't understand was that my recent work had achieved what contemporary painters had been pursuing for decades. A visual language that captured the psychological complexity of modern urban existence through innovative technical approaches. For 3 years I'd been developing a painting series called Digital Ghosts. Large-scale works that explored how technology was transforming human connection and social interaction. Using techniques that combined traditional oil painting with photographic elements and digital processing, I'd created images that seemed to vibrate between realism and abstraction. The breakthrough had come 18 months earlier, during a late-night studio session that had become routine since my family's dismissive comments about my work schedule. Alex stays in that studio until all hours, Mom had complained during a recent family dinner. Normal people work regular business hours and come home to real lives. This obsession with painting isn't healthy. Those late hours had led to the technical discovery that would define my artistic career. Working with layered painting techniques and digital photography, I'd developed a process that created images with unprecedented depth and emotional resonance. The paintings appeared to shift and change as viewers moved around them, creating an experience of visual instability that perfectly captured the disorientation of contemporary digital life. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the director of contemporary art at the Whitney Museum, had been stunned by the work's implications. "Alex," she'd said after viewing my latest paintings, "this represents exactly the kind of innovation that defines artistic generations. You've found a visual language for experiences that couldn't be painted before." "The technical approach still feels experimental," I'd replied, still processing the magnitude of what I'd developed. "That's what breakthrough art looks like," Dr. Martinez had smiled. "Techniques that seem impossible until someone proves they're not." Within months of my discovery, major galleries had contacted my studio requesting exclusive representation rights. The Guggenheim Gallery, David Zwirner, and Hauser and Wirth had all made offers for solo exhibitions and long-term representation agreements. But the most significant recognition came when Dr. Richard Armstrong, the director of the Guggenheim Museum, had personally visited my studio to discuss acquiring my work for the museum's permanent collection. "Mr. Thompson," he'd said during our first meeting, "your paintings represent exactly the kind of innovative thinking that transforms how we understand contemporary art. We want to organize a major retrospective of your work." Major retrospective. The holy grail of artistic recognition. A solo museum exhibition that would establish my place in art history. "What kind of timeline are we discussing?" I'd asked. 18 months to opening if you can produce enough new work to fill our main galleries. We're prepared to provide unprecedented institutional support." Unprecedented institutional support. The Guggenheim was offering exhibition funding, catalog publication, international tour opportunities and permanent collection acquisition. But my family remained convinced that my painting was an expensive hobby that would eventually be abandoned for practical employment like Marcus's finance career. Alex just needs to accept that the studio phase is ending, Dad had said during last week's family dinner. Time to transition into real work that provides actual income and social recognition. Actual income. The Guggenheim exhibition would generate gallery sales worth millions of dollars, plus long-term market value for my entire body of work. Social recognition. My retrospective would be covered by every major art publication, museum journal and cultural media outlet worldwide. But none of that mattered in my family's assessment, because studio work wasn't real employment like managing investment portfolios or running design businesses. The final irony came when I learned that this weekend's contemporary art fair, where Dr. Armstrong would be announcing my Guggenheim retrospective to the international art community, was being held at the same convention center where my family had planned their monthly celebration brunch. Let's go to the Metropolitan Club, Marcus had suggested during our planning call. They have that elegant dining room, and the atmosphere is perfect for celebrating my latest quarterly performance. The Metropolitan Club, where the art world's most influential figures would be gathered to discuss breakthrough contemporary work, including my exhibition. Alex should come celebrate with us, Mom had added. They spend too much time isolated in that studio. Family social events would be good for their emotional development. Family social events would be good for my emotional development, while the Guggenheim director prepared to announce that my work would receive the most prestigious solo exhibition of the year. The art fair setup. The week before our family celebration brunch, the Contemporary Art Fair had transformed the convention center into the epicenter of international art market discussions. Distinguished curators, gallery directors and museum officials gathered to review the year's most significant artistic developments and plan future exhibition priorities. Dr. Armstrong had specifically requested that I attend the fair's final morning, when major museum announcements would be made to the assembled art community. Alex, he'd said during our planning call, your retrospective represents the kind of career-defining moment that establishes artistic legacies. The art world needs to understand what you've accomplished. I'm honored to participate, I'd replied, though I was nervous about presenting to such a distinguished audience. You won't just be participating, Dr. Armstrong had smiled. You'll be the keynote focus. Your exhibition is exactly why we organize these announcements, to identify and celebrate work that changes everything. Keynote focus. My family's studio hobby would be featured as the fair's primary exhibition announcement. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more uncomfortable. My family's celebration brunch was scheduled for the same morning as my retrospective announcement, in the same building where art world leaders would be discussing my museum exhibition. We should get a nice table in the main dining room, Dad had suggested during our planning. Somewhere prominent where Marcus can network with other successful professionals who might be dining there. The main dining room where museum directors and gallery owners would be discussing my Guggenheim retrospective and permanent collection acquisition. Alex needs to dress appropriately for once, Mom had added with concern. No more of those paint-stained studio clothes. Real social events require professional appearance. Professional appearance for a morning when I'd be recognized as one of the art world's most promising painters. I'd spent the week trying to decide whether to tell my family about the announcement or let them discover my achievements organically during their celebration of Marcus's investment success. By Friday I'd made my decision. For 3 years, they'd dismissed my artwork as expensive hobby activity while lecturing me about real career choices. They'd characterized my artistic development as extended self-indulgence that prevented me from finding legitimate employment. They'd made their assumptions about my worth and potential. Now they'd face the reality of what I'd actually accomplished while they weren't paying attention. The revelation. The Metropolitan Club's main dining room hummed with quiet conversation as distinguished guests discussed business developments and professional opportunities over elegant brunches. Following the art fair's conclusion, cultural leaders from across the world had gathered to celebrate artistic discoveries and plan collaborative projects. My family arrived precisely at 11, dressed in their finest attire for Marcus's quarterly performance celebration. Dad had specifically requested a prominent table where other diners could appreciate our family's professional success. This is perfect, Mom said as we were seated near the dining room center. So sophisticated, and I can see several other successful-looking families dining here this morning. Successful-looking families that included museum directors, gallery owners, and international art collectors. Marcus held court at the table's head, describing his latest investment strategies and client acquisition while Dad ordered expensive champagne to commemorate his achievements. To real success, Dad announced, raising his glass in the traditional toast. And to Marcus's continued excellence in providing valuable services that generate actual profits. Real success. Valuable services that generate actual profits. While art collectors from around the world gathered to discuss work that would be preserved in museum collections for centuries. Alex should really start thinking about transitioning into practical work like Marcus's career, Mom said, continuing the familiar theme. All this studio time isn't leading anywhere economically viable. Studio time that had produced work worthy of the Guggenheim's most prestigious exhibition space. I keep telling Alex that advertising agencies would hire them immediately, Marcus added helpfully. They know all the artistic techniques. Perfect for commercial design positions that pay real money. Commercial design positions, while the Guggenheim prepared to showcase my work as representing the future of contemporary painting. The important thing, Dad said, warming to his favorite lecture topic, is that Alex eventually accepts that art careers aren't sustainable. They need stable employment with measurable income. Stable employment, while museum directors offered me unprecedented institutional support and permanent collection representation. At that moment, Dr. Richard Armstrong approached our table with several distinguished colleagues I recognized from art publications and museum exhibitions. Alex, he said warmly, wonderful to see you here this morning. My family looked up with polite curiosity, assuming this was a casual social encounter. Dr. Armstrong, I replied, my voice carefully professional. I'd like you to meet some colleagues, Dr. Armstrong continued, his voice carrying the authority that commanded cultural institutions and international art markets. Dr. Klaus Biesenbach from MoMA, Victoria Miro from the London Gallery, and David Zwerner from New York. MoMA. Victoria Miro. David Zwerner. Names that represented the pinnacle of contemporary art exhibition and representation. My family's faces showed confusion as they processed these introductions. We've been discussing your remarkable artistic breakthrough, Dr. Biesenbach said with genuine enthusiasm. Your Digital Ghost series could revolutionize how we understand contemporary painting. Artistic breakthrough. Revolutionize contemporary painting. Professional recognition at the highest levels of cultural institutions. I'm sorry, Marcus said uncertainly, but who are you exactly? Dr. Richard Armstrong, director of the Guggenheim Museum, he replied with crisp authority. I'm here to announce that Alex will have a major solo retrospective, our most significant contemporary painting exhibition in recent history. Director of the Guggenheim Museum. Major solo retrospective. Most significant contemporary painting exhibition. The family celebration had transformed into an art world announcement. There seems to be some confusion, Dad said quickly, his voice defensive. Alex paints as a hobby. They're not a real professional artist or anything like that. Mr. Thompson, Victoria Miro said with the quiet authority that filled gallery openings worldwide. Alex has developed painting techniques that represent a paradigm shift in contemporary art. Their work will influence artistic practice for generations. Paradigm shift in contemporary art. Influence artistic practice for generations. The family's studio hobby was being recognized as breakthrough cultural achievement. That's impossible, Mom said, her voice rising with confusion. Alex just paints pictures in a cluttered apartment. They don't do real professional artwork. Mrs. Thompson, David Zwerner said with gallery precision, Alex's paintings have achieved technical innovations that couldn't be created before. This represents the kind of breakthrough that transforms art history. Technical innovations. Breakthrough that transforms art history. Alex's retrospective will tour internationally after the Guggenheim exhibition, Dr. Armstrong added, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. We're planning museum presentations in London, Paris, and Tokyo. International tour. Museum presentations worldwide. Marcus sat in stunned silence as the implications became clear. His investment success was being overshadowed by artistic achievements that would be preserved in cultural institutions forever. Alex, Mom said desperately, turning toward me with tears forming, why didn't you tell us about any of this? We had no idea your painting was actually important. For 3 years I tried to explain my artistic development while they dismissed it as expensive hobby work. I described my gallery representation while they lectured me about finding real employment. I tried to tell you, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly through the dining room's sudden attention. Every time I mentioned gallery exhibitions or critical recognition, someone changed the subject or told me to find a real job. But Alex, Dad said, his voice breaking, we didn't understand that studio work could be this significant. You never explained that you were doing real professional art. I explained it constantly, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. You decided it wasn't important because it didn't look like Marcus's finance career. The truth settled over the table like expensive champagne, impossible to ignore or dismiss. Dr. Armstrong placed exhibition materials on the table. Alex, if you're ready, I'd like to make the official announcement to our colleagues here this morning. Before I could respond, he'd moved toward the podium that had been set up for cultural presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Armstrong said, his voice commanding the attention of the art world's most distinguished leaders, I have the honor of announcing this year's most significant exhibition. The dining room fell silent as cultural leaders turned toward the Guggenheim director's announcement. Alex Thompson has developed painting techniques that achieve unprecedented visual complexity, the artistic breakthrough we've been anticipating for decades. The applause was immediate and sustained. Museum curators, gallery directors and art collectors rose to their feet in recognition of work that would influence artistic development for generations. As the recognition continued, I looked toward my family's table. Mom and Dad sat frozen in their seats, their assumptions about my career completely shattered. Marcus managed a weak smile, but his eyes showed shock at discovering that his impractical sibling was being celebrated by people he'd never imagined could exist. The celebration of Marcus's investment success had become the announcement of my artistic breakthrough. The aftermath. The 72 hours following Dr. Armstrong's announcement transformed my family relationships and my understanding of artistic recognition in ways that seemed impossible just days earlier. By Monday morning, art publications had featured my work, galleries had requested representation meetings, and museums worldwide had inquired about acquiring my paintings. Marcus called first, his voice mixing genuine pride with obvious bewilderment. Alex, I had no idea your studio work was this important. Why didn't you ever explain that you were creating actual museum-quality art? I tried to explain it constantly, I replied. Every time I mentioned gallery exhibitions or critical reviews, someone told me to find a real job. But we thought you were just doing artistic experiments, not real professional work that could influence culture. Contemporary painting is real professional work. It always was. The conversation marked the beginning of a fundamental shift in how Marcus viewed professional achievement and creative careers. Mom called next, her voice heavy with regret and confusion. Alex, I feel terrible about how we've been treating your work. We just didn't understand that artistic practice could be this significant. You didn't want to understand, I said gently. Every time I tried to share my exhibitions, you changed the subject to Marcus's investment performance. We thought we were encouraging you toward more practical employment. We didn't realize you were already doing the most important work imaginable. Dad's conversation was the most difficult, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose fundamental assumptions had collapsed. Alex, I owe you an enormous apology. I spent years telling you to abandon art for real work, while you were developing techniques that will be studied for decades. You weren't trying to hurt me, I said. You just couldn't imagine that studio work could be more important than traditional careers. How do I make up for 3 years of dismissing the most important work you'll ever do? By supporting what I'm actually accomplishing instead of what you think I should be accomplishing. The art world's response was overwhelming. Within a week, I'd received representation offers from galleries across 3 continents, museum acquisition requests worth millions of dollars, and academic position opportunities that would establish me as one of the field's leading artists. Dr. Martinez helped me navigate the sudden attention and career opportunities. Alex, she said during one of our planning sessions, your family's reaction isn't unusual. Most people can't conceptualize breakthrough art until they see the institutional recognition it receives. They made me feel like my work was pointless for 3 years. Your work was never pointless. Their understanding was limited. There's a difference. The most significant change came in my relationship with artistic confidence. For years, my family's dismissive attitudes had made me question whether my painting was valuable or sustainable as a career path. Now, surrounded by cultural leaders who understood the implications of my work, I realized that my art was exactly as important as I'd always believed, regardless of my family's ability to recognize its value. 6 months later, my Guggenheim retrospective had opened to unprecedented critical acclaim and record attendance. International museums had acquired my work for permanent collections, and art schools worldwide had begun incorporating my techniques into their curricula. My family's understanding of my career had evolved dramatically. Marcus regularly brought colleagues to my exhibition openings, proudly introducing me as my sibling, the museum artist. Mom and Dad had become enthusiastic advocates for arts funding and cultural institution support. But the most important transformation was internal. I'd learned that artistic worth isn't determined by family recognition, and creative significance doesn't require unanimous approval from people who lack expertise in cultural fields. During a recent family dinner, Dad offered career advice about managing my sudden artistic prominence. Alex should consider all these gallery representation offers carefully, he suggested. Some of these partnerships could be very lucrative. I'm focused on advancing my artistic development rather than maximizing profits, I replied. The quality of the work is what matters most. That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes you an exceptional artist, he said with genuine pride. The conversation ended without argument or defensiveness. His opinion was valuable input now, not authority that could undermine my artistic confidence. Looking around the table at people who had shaped my childhood and challenged my adulthood, I felt something I'd never experienced during family dinners. Complete peace with my chosen career path and absolute confidence in my artistic contributions. The young person who had desperately wanted family approval for their creative interests had evolved into an artist whose work was transforming contemporary painting worldwide. My family's recognition was gratifying, but it wasn't the source of my artistic identity. The art world's validation confirmed what I'd always known. Breakthrough creativity is valuable whether or not everyone understands its importance. I'd learned that some achievements transcend family approval, some careers exceed conventional understanding, and some contributions to human culture matter regardless of who recognizes their significance. The artwork that had been dismissed as playing with paint was now influencing artistic development, advancing cultural understanding, and establishing me as a leader in contemporary painting.